Hello and welcome to a quick video that is for users who have some historic data and want to think about their early in the school year assessments and really leverage that historic data to see positive instructional trends. So I'm really lucky I got to see a district do this in person, and it was some of the coolest work that I've seen with Forefront. So I can't get over the idea of doing this and want to share it with you all. So in my demo account here, we're set up in a kind of realistic beginning of the school year status. Most folks don't have any data in. I am impersonating a district leader, looking at the pacing page now. So this idea here that I'm going to kind of model is the idea of thinking about, we haven't even given the second grade fall screener, but what do we already know before we give it? Because we have the historic data. So I'm going to click here where it says fall on the pacing page. And you're going to see right now I've got one student with data, which is the beginning of the school year. Someone's really proactive. But here on this three-dot menu, I'm going to click that and click where it says edit cohort. And I'm going to drop this term back to 24-25. So now I'm looking at last year's data. I also want to go ahead and add another cohort by clicking that plus sign. And I'm going to click where it says course and school. So I'm looking at second grade. I want to look at that, but this time I want to look at 23-24. And again, I want to focus just on this elementary school, so I'm kind of comparing apples to oranges. So one thing that's important here is on the right where we've got the cohorts, they're not really in time order. So I'm going to click that little drag handle and switch them. So we've got 23-24 compared to 24-25. If I right click, you'll see I can modify the appearance. So maybe I want to have more of a kind of obvious change in between the two columns to help me see which year I'm looking at. And now we're just looking at the overall. So I'm kind of framing this conversation that you could have in three questions. And one is really important and I think sometimes gets overlooked. So the first question, before we even start kind of doing any comparisons, is how valid and robust is our data collection? So one of the cool aspects of Forefront is looking at this historic data, but if you're not looking at kind of the same amount of students, you may get a skewed impression. So over here on the right where it says not assessed, I'm going to go ahead and toggle that on. And what we're going to notice is things look pretty good. So we had maybe a little bit of a smaller district here in my fake demo account, but I only had 2 students with no data compared to 1. And those are small enough numbers in a school that, that might just be a student who isn't taking grade level assessments. For a counterpoint, let's go ahead and add the spring screener just so we can see what it looks like when the data collection is not as consistent. So I've added that. And here's a good example of if we toggle this off, it looks like a positive instructional trend, right? We're seeing more green. But if I toggle on that not assessed, we can see that for spring last year, most of our students in the building were not assessed. So if this is being used as a universal screener, then that's something that we need to talk about as a staff and just kind of starting from square one, are we getting in the data that we expect? So I'm going to hide spring. Let's focus on the one where things are looking better and fall is a little bit more timely. So I'm going to switch report types by clicking up here in the upper right and going to the question analysis. When we're guiding instruction, I love to look at that question analysis. And to recap what we're looking at, we are looking at the fall second grade screener. The column with the bubbles is from 23-24. The column that's just plain is from 24-25. You could add that 25-26. I'm not going to because I don't have data in yet. And I'm kind of modeling how you can do this before any data is collected. So first question I think is powerful to lead with is, where are we noticing positive instructional trends? So where are we seeing more students proficient in kind of the second column for the question than the first? So one that stands out to me is question 2. So counting across the century. So that's a really exciting one to have more students proficient on. I think that's a valuable jumping off place to start talking about what can we kind of give credit to for that instructional trends. Thinking about too, oftentimes these fall universal screeners, we might be looking back to first grade. So maybe it's looping back and asking those first grade teachers, how have they changed, counting towards those higher numbers. But having conversations around that is really powerful. Again, I got to see this in person. It gives teachers a sense of efficacy. And also, when we look at what's successful, we are thinking about how we can replicate that success. So starting there can be a really powerful conversation. Um, Again, there's some smaller ones. Question 3 still has a negative trend, or excuse me, a positive trend. So anything where you're seeing that second bar with more green is something to celebrate. Once you've kind of talked through that, we can flip it and say, where are we seeing some areas of negative growth? So where are students not making positive trends on the fall screener? So a couple that stand out to me are 7 and 8. This is all fake data, so unfortunately, we can't actually learn anything from this, but similar things happen in real data. But we can see when we gave this back in 23-24, we only had one kid who wasn't getting this, and now we have a much larger group. So next question is what is this actually asking? Again, I can see that by clicking the question on the bottom, and I can see that these are Make 10 facts. So kind of these are linked, obviously, and we can see that from the fake data, that students are kind of having some difficulty at the beginning of the year thinking about these Make 10 facts. So let's say, again, I'm with my team of teachers. We're seeing this trend. We haven't even given the fall screener yet, but we're saying we don't want to replicate this. We want to know which kids are really struggling with Make 10. Is it something that they just haven't been refreshed on? That sort of thing. So we can talk about setting goals, and how to respond instructionally. So in the universal screeners, in the fractional reasoning screeners, Bridges third edition, in Dibbles, we have what are called next steps. So if I click here, I'll have a link, and that will take me to some activities that are aligned with this skill. So maybe you're talking with your team of teachers and, hey, we're just going to have a number talk about 10 and kind of talk through what are those Make 10 facts. Let's refresh ourselves what that means. Maybe we're sending home instructions for families to play Target 10. Really great game there. Help kids think about those 10 friendly or those Make 10 facts. So a couple quick options right there. What we always talk about at Forefront is we want the majority of your time to be able to be spent responding to instruction versus trying to make sense of the data. Hopefully I've modeled here so we can pretty quickly respond to that. And then talking about goals. Again, looking at this, we haven't given the fall screener. If the teachers are doing kind of those quick activities to refresh kids on those Make 10 facts, you could talk about what would it look like for success, if we have students more proficient, what are our goals around that? And then that's something you can check in after teachers have given the fall screener this year. But really helping them see, just like we do for our students, that their work is paying off. So I think that's an under-celebrated aspect of data, is it can show us when our actions have positive consequences. So I think that's a really cool way to think about beginning of year data, especially if you have historic data. As always, if you have questions or issues, please reach out to support@forefront.education, and best of luck with back to school.